Hello there. Welcome to episode 32 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by Medievalists.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and questions that we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, Distinguished Professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
I'm Kelly DeVries, Professor of History at Loyola University, Maryland, and this upcoming year, a Distinguished Visiting Professor at the Air Force Academy.
What are you drinking tonight at the bar, Kelly?
Well, I was thinking about this because there is some really good Liégeois beer. As we're going to be talking about the Liégeois, I think I'll go with a beer from that region.
Good choice. Yeah, you got to go with Belgian beer.
Yeah.
This is 100% a Belgian beer kind of day or night if you're listening to us in the evening. Because, we're going to be talking about the Battle of Othée, fought on the 23rd of September, 1408. It's a battle that probably a lot of people haven't heard of. This isn't sort of major powers battle.
No.
This is very much kind of more of a local thing. But there are some interesting, I think, features to this battle. One is that we have some cool sources to it. And another's, on one side, you've got one of the more fascinating people in this entire period.
Yeah.
John the Fearless. So how about we actually start? Do you want to start with him, or do you want to start with the local conditions?
Yeah, let's start with him.
Okay.
Although the local conditions are not his alone.
Yeah.
This has all begun essentially when his father, Philip the Bold, the Duke of Burgundy, marries the daughter of the Count of Flanders, Louis de Male, and he then becomes essentially Duke of or Count of Flanders as well as Duke of Burgundy, and then he starts acquiring various properties. We'll get into Liege in just a moment, but John is his eldest son, and will become the next Duke of Burgundy, and also then Count of Flanders, and what other titles is there. But John got his own backstory even before he becomes Duke, and we've kind of gone over it a little bit when we did Battle of Nicopolis.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, but it bears bringing up again because he is a fascinating character. He's just a teen, and he gets the command of the armies that are heading towards one of the worst defeats that the Western Europeans are going to see against the Turks.
Yeah, at Nicopolis. Just an extraordinary defeat. And go back and listen to that episode if you don't remember Nicopolis. Believe me, the people who went there remembered it. It was a big deal and really bad. And he was 19, 20, I think, when
he turns 20 on the journey. So and up to that time,
is that what it is? Okay,
been in a little bit of fighting, but
yeah.
Not in a command, not to command armies from all over Western Europe, certainly. And yes, those people who were in it, they regretted being in it, especially those that then were killed after the battle. John himself is ransomed. It takes about another year for him to get back to Burgundy, and he gets back to Burgundy, and he's going to become the Duke, and now he's got this big loss hanging over his shoulders because he was in command, and I'm sure that not many people around him let him forget it, but at least not the French.
Yeah. I actually just looked it up. He was 25. He was 25. Right. He was 25. So he was a young feller. 25 years old. He was born in 1371. I went in and looked it up because I couldn't remember for sure. But yeah, he hadn't done a lot but before this, as far as fielding command, as you say. He ends up having a pretty important place in military history that we'll actually talk about a little bit today in this particular action. because this is a guy who, kind of, when you think about the development of gunpowder and artillery in particular, the use of artillery in the field. John the Fearless is a name that comes up again and again and again and again.
It does. And, when Kay Smith and I were writing the book on the Valois, Dukes of Burgundy, he's the prominent one. There are some guns that come into the arsenal, the Burgundian arsenal, when his father is Duke, but his father will die in 1404, and that's when the arsenal starts getting bigger. And John the Fearless is primary to that increasing size, and increasing in different sizes and shapes and so forth. It'll be up to his son Philip the Good to really to make Burgundy probably the biggest gunpowder, or to give Burgundy the biggest gunpowder arsenal during his reign. But it's certainly put there by John, and he becomes Duke in 1404, and it's clear that is one of the things he wants to increase.
He's really trying to push Burgundian power. Right? We don't want to get into the whole mix of everything because it's not necessarily pertinent to Othée, but he is somebody who's very much in the middle of all the politics of France and of European courts in general that are ongoing in the so-called 100 Years' War, because he's really an integral player, as his father had been. The Duke of Burgundy is a major powerhouse. We don't think about how important Burgundy was to this entire period. I think mostly because it's like not on the map anymore, right? Yeah. So people don't think of Burgundian history or whatever, but it was absolutely vital and huge across this period.
And we also have to think about John in the politics, like you say, because just the year before Othée, he is responsible for killing the king's brother, Louis, Duke of Orleans. Oops. I mean, he will in fact blurt it out in court when the evidence is brought to the court that he's responsible. So this will begin a big change, because not only does it reverse his father's Francophilia his father had to dance a pretty jig with the English as well, because the economy of the Low Country economy of Flanders was based on English wool. But this here will completely switch John to an alliance with the English. He will not be at Agincourt. He will not. He fights his own huge civil war for many years, and in fact, I almost see the Liege-Wa situation develop out of this, because I sometimes wonder if he had been still in the court in 1407, 1408, if he doesn't try to push power to acquire Liege against the people there. I mean, they've acquired it, but to actually look at the rebellion that's going on there and decide that he's going to fight it. I don't think there's any evidence one way or another, but.
Well, I mean, it'd be kind of an interesting counterfactual to imagine, right? But yeah, the murder of the Mad King's brother is absolutely massive for this entire period of the 100 Years' War. Really is integral to shaping everything moving forward. And as you said, this is why, not saying Henry V did a bad job at Agincourt, but he's not fighting the entirety of the French army, and he's not doing so because of the fallout of all of that and what has happened with Burgundy.
Another great counterfactual to play. What would happen at Agincourt if John the Fearless is there on the side of the French?
Oh yeah, if the Burgundians show up in force, yeah. I mean, there are Burgundian allied. French captains there, but not the man, and it probably is also Brittany doesn't really show up. Anyway, that's for another story. But yeah, John the Fearless holds this central role that we kind of don't think about, and he is on one side He's the major player on one side of the Battle of Othée. But to understand like what the heck this battle is, we are going to have to go back and say for it must be the 20th time in our 30-second podcast now that the Low Countries in the Middle Ages are not what they are today. The Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, it don't look like that in the Middle Ages. It is a patchwork quilt. It's a mess. It is a mess. You have some major, sort of regions. Flanders being, I think, I'd say probably the most famous one and probably the most important one.
Certainly the most.
But there's all these other little ones. Definitely the most prosperous. Yeah, they're loaded with money. But you have all these other little ones too, and one of those is the lovely town of Liege, the Prince-Bishopric of Liege. What is a Prince-Bishopric?
Yeah, there's a couple of these in the Low Countries about this time, but Liege has been a Prince-Bishopric for centuries. It was conceived as a Prince-Bishopric, and it does have a little more than the town of Liege within its realm. But the Prince-Bishopric is the bishop is the prince, and the problem is the bishop is going to be appointed by whoever's got the power. And in the for most of Liege's history, that had been the Holy Roman Emperor. But they had been acquired piecemeal by the Burgundians over a period of a couple of decades before John takes the throne, the Burgundian throne. And for the moment, they keep the bishopric kind of in the hands of the former bishop. But this is a really difficult. I'd love somebody just to do a history and a history of Liege in English, trying to define what medieval Liege was like, because it's the bishop often didn't live in Liege. He often lived in whatever court he was with, and so Liégeois had some sovereignty, and then he would show up, and they all had to kowtow to his wishes, and he increased the fines. He was never a very religious person. There is no saints after about the 10th century that come out of Liege from these prince bishops. They are celibate, though. So nobody can be legitimate. They have children, but none of them are legitimate.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I was going to say they do have. They're not. These men are celibate like their fathers and their fathers before them. That they're not. They can't have legitimate children because they're prince bishops. And Liege to this day is very proud of its Prince Bishopric past.
Beautiful cathedral there.
And look, Liege is a beautiful town. It is a beautiful town, just sitting astride the river. That river, flows down. What Maastricht, I think, is the next big town down the river. Which I got a soft place in my heart for Maastricht. Yeah. Go Maastricht.
And Maastricht was often within the realm of the Prince Bishop of Liege. So it is this time in 1407. It is part of the Prince Bishopric of Liege. So are those other towns up the river, Dinant and Bouvienne and a few other things like that.
Yeah, if y'all just look at a map of the Prince Bishopric of Liege, it's just this weird tumor-looking thing. It's like along the river, it's just kind of scraggly, and then there's another little piece of it that's separated out. It's really something. It's really something. But again, that whole area is just all these little things, and they kind of all fit together in this awful jigsaw. And power dynamics are very relative in this area. That obviously Flanders holds a lot of weight because it holds a lot of money, has a lot of land, but their relationship to outside powers is very much in flux. Like, are you with the Holy Roman Emperor? Are you with the King of France, the King of England? Are we with each other? It's complicated. It's complicated,
and it's complicated way before this battle occurs. The one thing we could say though that is not complicated is Liégeois people do not like having authority over them. If it's a Prince-Bishopric, if he's away, that's fine. But the moment he starts coming in, they will start rebelling because the taxes go up. They can't do the deals, the cloth making. There's a huge amount of, on the Meuse River there's a huge amount of traffic that goes up and down. So they're a merchant's town in most regards. So is Denain, so is Bouvienne and Hué and Tongeren and all of these towns, Maastricht as well, that are under the control. So they're like the Flemings in this way. Drop of a hat, they will rebel, especially if they think there's some economic sovereignty that they can have. It's just that when they rebel, it's heresy too, because the guy's not just a prince, he's a bishop as well. But that's not complicated. They will rebel. The Liégeois are almost equal to the Flemings in the number of times that they rebel in the especially the last couple of centuries.
And here they do rebel.
Here they do rebel. Yeah.
And here they do rebel. And they rebel. They don't like their current Prince Bishop. I mean, when you kind of boil it all down. I mean, look, from everything I've read, it sounds like the guy was a schmuck. Yeah. Like, they got every right to be mad. This guy's, because he's throwing around his weight, and they don't like that. As you said, kind of like, kowtow to me kind of thing. But he's, he didn't become Prince Bishop, like by raffle. No. His name's John of Bavaria, and he became Prince Bishop because he's connected to some powers, as it were. He's got friends in high places. Friends in high places. Comes from a strong family, Duke of Bavaria, and of course he's got the Pope's support, right? To become Prince Bishop. So that's good for him. And in 1408. He had been Prince Bishop. I should have looked this up. For 18 years. Yeah. For 18 years. For 18 years, they've been putting up with this guy. Do we know what the kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back here, or was just they'd had enough? I don't actually know myself.
Yeah, I think they just had enough. The record's a little bit, because most of the people are take count of this. We have, we do have some archival records, but most of these are chronicles, and so they're being written by churchmen. So they're, in many ways they're thinking, well, John of Bavaria has overstepped his control, but as most of them don't know what a Prince Bishop is either. It's kind of difficult for them to say, oh well, politically he was strong, religiously he wasn't. That certainly was the case, except that he wasn't very politically strong either. So ultimately, I think what is the straw that breaks camel's back is that he leaves. He finally says, my safety here is not going to be guaranteed, and so he runs off to John the Fearless.
Yeah, he runs away. First, he runs away to Maastricht, so heads downriver. But ultimately, he calls in the big guns. Look, I need some help. Help put me back in power. Help me get back and safe in the city. In the meantime, of course, the Liege have decided to elect their own kind of dude in charge.
They have.
So they've put a guy in charge. Who's that young bucker?
Jeez, I've got to look him up now too. These the new people are new people. You have it at hand? I missed
Henry of
Henry
Horn.
of Horn. Yeah, that's right. Uh,
Henry
who's
of
Low
Horn.
Countries. So he's. I mean, Horn is not very far up. Small little minor nobility, but it's not very. He's not very far away from Liège. So they're essentially picking somebody that knows them. The Liégeois are,
Right.
and
Right.
here's so they've got two prince bishops. They've got their elected guy who's in Liège, and then
Uh-huh.
John of Bavaria who's in Maastricht. So the Liégeois decide, you know what? This is September 1407. They say, you know what? Let's get to Maastricht and get this guy and get him out of our hair. And so they besiege Maastricht. That's the first act of this military act of this war, is a siege that takes place in Maastricht. The surprising thing with this is the number of cannons that seem to be locally held by the Liégeois, because this is one of the first sieges where there is a major contingent of artillery that are pounding on the walls. Walls.
Why do we think there was such interest in artillery in this area? I mean, do we know? Is there something? Do they have a connection?
Well, later records will tell us that the Meuse River, along Meuse River is a lot of cannon makers. So when Burgundy will use this element, and I think it's probably for transportation purposes, the Meuse goes right through Burgundy, and it connects all the way up to the Netherlands at Dordrecht. So it's going to be a vital area to move cannons back and forth, because the things are heavy. They can be small even, but they're heavy, and so I think that may be the connection. Problem is, of course, our archival records at this point really only start after this siege. We've got a few records beforehand, but the ones from John Fearless suggest that they come after the siege, and it may be that John recognizes the value here, because these are not held by these are in the hands of the rebels. These are cannons in the hands of the rebels, and that is kind of an interesting situation. We don't talk about that a lot, but early on, it's the localities, it's the major towns that are buying guns, and they're using. So when they rebel, they use them against whoever. That happens also with Ghent, Bruges, Ypres. They all own guns, and this is going to become more and more central authority sort of thing, with the arsenal now become part of the Duke of Burgundy's, and he will requisition various guns from the towns when he needs them. That's kind of sidestepping your question, because we really don't know.
We just really don't know. So they got guns, and laying siege to Maastricht. Now Maastricht has walls. You can actually go see them, still today. They're very cool, as walls are, because we're military historians, so we get all excited about walls. Come look at the wall. I know, Dad. Shut up. No, but look at it. So Maastricht is able to hold out. In any siege is not fun, right? It's not good to be besieged. Do you think they actually could have breached Maastricht had Burgundy kind of not shown up?
Well, there was nobody else coming to their aid, so maybe with a lot of time, Maastricht could have breached the walls, or at least, I think what their goal was to get the Maastrichters to rebel with them, and then throw John of Bavaria out. So that, I think, would be the goal of the rebels in this case, was not to breach the walls, but to really just cause them, eventually, the citizens, to simply say, yeah, we'll join you in this rebellion. We've got records that there were huge numbers of big cannons there. And in fact, the one that comes through is that Maastricht received about 1,500 large bombard balls during this siege. about a 30 a day is what that means. And
Wow.
so we're really talking about an expenditure of guns and or expenditure of ammunition, stone ammunition in this case, against stone, but also a huge amount of very expensive gunpowder. And that'll tell you how much money Liege had as a city, because this is, of course, they've got the bishop, the Prince Bishop's treasury too. I mean, he didn't actually pay, put it all in his wagon as he goes fleeing off to Maastricht, but so.
Right. So they got some stuff on their side, for sure. Um,
But
now,
this is one thing. This is the third circling of
yeah.
the walls. Maastricht has grown fairly large, and you could still see. I mean, there's still another one outside, but which is where the real D'Artagnan will eventually die in the 17th century. But this is I've looked all around this wall. It's primarily still there in great amount, and it was a very strong wall. So I I don't think that there was the Liégeois were really counting on bringing the walls down or anything. I think they were just counting on eventually Maastrichters joining the rebellion.
Right. So, so our Liégeois rebels, trying to get Maastricht to, come on, guys, like, hand this guy over. You're not gonna like him any more than we're gonna like him. So, like, just like, let's just be done with this. Feeling pretty good. Siege goes on for quite some time. What this is, like a month and a half, something like that.
Yeah. Well, no, in fact, longer.
Longer.
It starts in September, and then it will go all the way. Well, it'll start in November. Sorry, 24th of November, and it'll go to the 7th of January. So a little bit more than a month, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So a couple months sieges. It's they're feeling pretty good now. They got a winter. That's a bad time to be doing a siege. When is our poor Prince Bishop getting his help?
Well, that one seems a little bit odd, because it seems that the rebels will step away from this siege, and it may be because they're wondering. They ended on January 7th, the first, but they come back in May, and so when they're back in I'm sorry, July, and they start the siege again in July and August. And they could do this because nobody's come to help the Maastrichters at all at that point in time. But there seems to be communication that's gone back and forth. And one of the things that it appears from the communication is that John the Fearless is being essentially given Liege by the Prince Bishop if he will come and save his life.
Hmm. So he's helping to bribe to get himself an army in place. So yeah, they go home. So put the crops and everything, planting's all good. It's a high days of summer. What are we going to do? Let's go back and let's do it. Let's do that siege again. Let's go back. Let's get that job done. But now word is coming that Burgundy's coming.
Yeah.
The big dog is coming, which changes this dynamic considerably.
It does, yeah.
You have the Prince Bishop is just sort of holding out in Maastricht. Now you have his side's no longer simply defensive. He's now got offensive capability on the way. And John the Fearless, though he had not done so hot at Nicopolis, has himself quite a force that he can call upon. And they have been engaged in other things. This is a veteran force.
Yeah, by this time they have this. I don't know that there'd be many that are veterans of Nicopolis, but they had been fighting this civil war against France, mostly in a very small scale, but they'd still been fighting, and they'd gotten better. The Liégeois know this, so they actually approach John the Fearless themselves and tried to negotiate with him. I mean, they wouldn't care. He could have Liege as long as they don't get the Prince Bishop back that they hate. So they are offering him whatever they can, but around the 20th of September of 1408, he simply says, "No, that's it. I'm going to fight."
Yeah, coming in hot. And this is basically gets us up to the battle.
Yeah.
Now the battle does not take place in Liege.
No.
There's stories about this, about why it's not in Liege. Why do they not hunker down in Liege, or, well, I mean, what are their options at this point? Why do they do what they do? Because they kind of take the worst option.
They do take the worst option.
It does not work out well for them. There were lots of choices here, and they took the worst of them. So what could they have done?
I'm with you. I think that they could have, because these are rebels. By this time, the rebellion has built. These are all in various different towns, but every one of them's walled. Tongan's walled. Tongan still has the Roman walls as well as the medieval walls, and that's where the battle will be fought close to. But Dinant, Bouvien, all of the major towns in the Prince-Bishopric of Liege all have walls, and I don't know what they just didn't realize that they could have gone back to their walls and sent negotiators to France, because France doesn't like. I mean, the King of France is not John's friend at this point in time. I think he's lucid periodically, but is remaining.
Yeah.
Paris is in the hands now of the Armagnacs, the Orléans faction, and it seems to me that it was completely unwise to not go back to their walled towns and just sit there, as John's not going to be able to bring them down, and they could have brought the French. I don't know, though. Again, it's not one of those things. We don't really have a chronicle that gives us the Liégeois point of view. That's what would really help here.
Sure. Because, what they decide to do, as I said, it's got to be the worst option, is I say, okay, well, let's move out into the open country and have ourselves a fight, which is not the super best idea when you're facing a veteran army. Now, who do we think has the numbers?
Well, that one is up in the air. We do have now, once we get the battle here, we have John Fearless's own account, which is really interesting to have the commanding general then write a very lengthy letter to his brother telling him what happens at the battle. He seems to think that the Liégeois have bigger numbers, and most of the chroniclers do too. But what John knows, and what the Liégeois should have recognized, is that the militias that the Liégeois are putting in the field do not have the experience. There's no cavalry. There's no, they can use guns, and maybe that's what they're expecting to be able to do, although gunpowder weapons were not used on battlefields very much. Here's going to be one of the first times. But marching against John, it boggles my imagination. These aren't the big armies or the experienced armies we're going to see at Agincourt. It is militia against military.
And even you look on the landscape where this takes place. It's not like there's this amazing position that gives a massive advantage in battle. Like there's like a rise on the landscape.
That you're being very generous.
I'm being like
this rise. If it goes more than 10 feet up, I'd be surprised. I looked at the battlefield the first time, and it's fun. Because you can figure out where it was fought. And this is really what gives the Low Countries the term low. It is just flat as can be across there. So there's no place that any army can hide. As far as we tell, Othée then was just a little tiny village, really. Had a few peasants who probably all run away at this point in time. So I had flat fields, and I don't know why the advantage was, or the Liégeois thought this was going to be of an advantage to him. John, when he kind of indicates that he's fine with the battlefield being on a flat land. He can use everything he's got, and he's got a lot of cavalry.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's just like we're in the middle of Kansas. I mean, it's just crazy.
It really is.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, it would be like if the Kansas sent the Chiefs out and then faced off with a little league team, a little league football team, you know.
Yeah. Oh my God. And yeah, they're just like in the middle of this plain. It's all farmland.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, today you can see it's just just north, I think, of the little town of Othée, which is still today just this dinky little town.
Yeah, still. I think the monument is the biggest to the battle is about the biggest thing in that entire town.
Yeah, because I mean these so they get out there and they're like, all right, well let's do this.
The only thing I could figure is that maybe they felt if they went out on battle and lost, they could still retreat into the towns and be safe. That's a silly notion, but it may be. I don't know. They're out on a flat land, and it really is a militia with some guns, a little bit of success of besieging Maastricht, although they hadn't gotten in, against seriously probably one of the best armies in Western Europe at the time.
And it's not, yeah, I mean it's not even like they're close to. I mean, you know, if you wanted to retreat back to Liege, it's too far. It's you don't need to be out. I don't know. It's just it's bonkers. Yeah. If anybody knows of some source that somehow explains what on earth they were thinking, love to see it because I have no idea what they're thinking.
And John's shocked. I mean, he writes near the top of his letter to his brother Anthony. He says, "We'd ridden forward about half a league. We saw them plainly, and they saw us." That tells you there's nothing to hide. There's not even a big rock.
Yeah, so there they are. Okay. And this letter, by the way, is in our medieval warfare reader. If you're interested, you can read the letter, and it is interesting to have his own account, and to see it kind of through his eyes, because he gives a lot of detail, and that's not necessarily what we always get, right? You know what Edward III writes. You know, he writes letters about the Battle of Crécy. They don't have a lot of like tactical detail, and here he's given like a play-by-play. Yeah. Like we did this, then they did this, and then we did this. And it's mostly we did this and they died.
The battle was over.
They died.
Yeah.
It is amazing. Now he gives obviously some kind of big numbers, but it's it probably wasn't as big as he says. You know, we always have this thing of numbers, but he says we dismounted in a fairly advantageous position.
Thinking they would come and attack us.
Said, okay, well, you know, let's get ready. He talks about his formation that he has a center mass of infantry, and then wings of bowmen who are protected by men at arms. So, you know, like this is kind of like, you know, crazy tactics, but without landscape. It's just on open plain, and they're this just kills me. The Liégeois start approaching him.
They do.
Like we're gonna come get you. I gotta think like he's like, really.
It may be it may be telling that we don't actually know who's leading the Liégeois from John's letter. And it just is, oh, yeah, they're moving as a mass within 3 bow shots. So,
Yeah,
there's not going to be clash at that point. But they've actually moved to where they can be seen by both sides.
yeah.
Maybe John.
He seems to have a notion that they are hoping, that the rebels are hoping, that they're going to get reinforcements from Tongres. But I don't know if he's just guessing on that, or if he was, saw something indicate that. Like, that would be the only reason I could ever think of this location, is that their army is moving. The rebel army was on the move from Liege to Tongres, maybe, and gets caught out in the open, right? And that's why we get things this way.
I'm going to give you another possibility here, because this one, again,
Okay.
it's one of these ones where we have great sources for the battle, and then because we can't see the rhyme or reason. But right after they move, the Liégeois move, they start firing their cannons against John. Now, John says they're 3 bow shots, so cannon's not going to work very effectively at that point. But one thing cannons have to have is level ground. So this may be why they have picked this area, is that they are thinking that their cannons are going to have a great effect, and they cannot have a hill in between them, or they cannot have um, trees or anything else. They've got to have a fairly strong shot. That would be
Mm.
my only indication, and
Mm.
that's only because I'm following what John says next in a letter, that after the 3 bow shots, the Liégeois stop and then start firing on them with the cannons.
Yeah. Well, they certainly, the other thing in there, to give them some credit or whatever, they're probably hoping to prevent him from, really connecting up, from John of Burgundy connecting up with other strengths in the area. So, like, well, we need to hit him quick, and so that's what they're trying to do. Yeah, none of it works. None of it works. So they fire their cannon, and we don't get any reaction from John's letter. John, it's like, I don't know if it didn't reach. The shots didn't reach. He seems like, so then they did that, and we kind of stood around for a while and decided they weren't going to get any closer. Right. So let's start the next phase of things. And the next phase is for him to advance. Yes. So, he had, seen the army, the Liégeois, dismounts, starts forming up. The rebels advance to within 3 bow shots, whatever that means.
These aren't long bows, I think, so, but still probably 300 yards.
Then they settle into place, start firing cannon. Something happens, nothing happens. We don't know. But at that point, now John the Fearless says, all right, we're now going to advance towards the rebels.
And it may be that the rebels are trying to move forward, get their cannons in place. They must have an exaggerated opinion about how far they would shoot, because if it's 3 bow lengths, and generally that's considered 100 meters or so, the large other cannons that are being used at this stage they're only firing 100 yards effectively. Now, there's obviously some bouncing and other things like that can happen with a cannonball that's shot even at this period in time. But don't you get the opinion by reading John's account that they missed? They just weren't even hitting them. It's like,
I get the impression that they fired and they weren't hitting. They were falling short.
I mean, it is really funny because it says they opened up, and then after we waited a little.
Yeah, after we waited a while, we decided to do something. And what John is meanwhile deciding to do is brilliant, right? He's going to take this open terrain to his advantage. Look, if you're gonna give me all the room I need to maneuver, well, let me plan out a pretty cool maneuver. And the maneuver he plans out is to send a unit, a substantial force. He says 400 mounted men at arms and 1,000 infantrymen to move around and hit the rebels in the rear, hit them from behind while he starts a frontal assault. Basically, he's just gonna sandwich them.
Yeah.
Just gonna smash them. And this is actually not. Isn't this essentially like how Rosebeck happens?
Yeah, well, it is that, and in our many militia failures, because we can always say Courtrai, yeah, one victory. In our many militia failures, I always say, especially the Low Countries.
Yeah.
I once tried to figure all of these things out in a 14th, 15th century with Liégeois, and the Flemings. They don't win very often. Liege wins only once as well, but in this time, I think it tells how immobile the Liégeois force is, because they could see this. This isn't a surprise maneuver by John. As John says, we see them, they saw us. So John's sending this group of mounted men, 400 mounted and 1,000 foot, inside. He's sending them around this mass of Liégeois, inside of the Liégeois.
It's when you kind of look at this, I guess it's astonishing. Like, what were they thinking? But also, it's actually kind of astonishing, honestly, that the Liege last as long as they do.
Yeah.
The Liégeois sort of caught in this predicament when the battle commences. You would really think that this would be quick work.
Yeah.
That this would be quick work. That's. Most medieval battles are pretty quick. This has all the hallmarks of something that's going to be over really, really quick, but it's not.
No, and that is one of the things we got to count the Liégeois as being brave. They might not have been the brightest force out on the field, certainly not in comparison to the other force, but they were brave, and this is kind of a standard for the militias of the Low Countries, as you get this bravery, even in the face of losses. The Flemings, again, in Mons-Pavel, Rosbeck, as you mentioned, the militias will, and maybe it's because they recognize that they're going to be punished, their families are going to be punished, unless they can win.
Yeah, here's what John the Fearless says about it. He's writing to his brother. He says, "Experienced people say that they have never seen men fight so well as they did." That is the Liégeois. For the battle lasted nearly 1.5 hours, and for at least half an hour, presumably at the start, no one knew which way it would go. As far as can be ascertained from those who inspected the dead, the Lord of Perez, his son, that's Henry of Horn, his son, the rebel anti-bishop, another son of his, and a good 24,000 to 26,000 Liégeois were killed. They were all, or nearly all, armed, and they had in their army 500 mounted men and 100 archers from England. An hour and a half of close quarter melee. That's intense. Like, that is.
It is intense. And most medieval battles, as we've said over and over again on this podcast, are not fought to death. They're fought until one side leaves and runs away, and then it's the decision to follow them up or not. We don't see this, and I'm not sure it's because they've now been completely encircled by this force that was sent around back, so they don't have much options. But they should have been able to flee, and especially flee to Tongres or to Liege itself. They don't.
Whether or not these numbers are reliable, we've talked before about somewhat distrust of numbers.
Let's just say a lot.
It's in the thousands. It's in the thousands. Yeah. It is in the thousands, and it is. Um, devastating. It's just a devastating, horrific massacre in the end. We know I mean, John the Fearless says, this is kind of a close thing for at the start for half an hour, which means for 1 hour it was not a close thing. Means for 1 hour it was basically the killing, one-sided affair of just guy after guy after guy, like just taking him down. Just awful to imagine. Really awful to imagine. And it effectively ends resistance. When this happens, this pretty much does it. He doesn't have to do a lot of
No, he
much
doesn't. And
after this.
all the towns kind of come in on his side very quickly afterwards. Now, this is not the last rebellion of Liege. His John's grandson's going to face a huge rebellion in the 1460s and 70s. Charles Bull, but and there's a couple of small ones in between. So this isn't the last time that the Burgundians are going to have to put down a rebellion, and they do so with force. I mean, Charles the Bold is the one that is even more forceful than this, because he actually attacks citizens. Here we're attacking militia, but at least as John says, they're all armed. That is not what Charles does when he fights Liege. Wow. And but John puts a lot of emphasis on the order of his troops and how disciplined they are. So that may be part of it. But I think it's just Liégeois militia couldn't have won once their cannons were ineffective.
Yeah, and so as I said, this is not a huge battle in terms of fame. This is not your Crécy, your Agincourt, that kind of stuff, your Nicopolis. But it is a rather important battle on a couple of bases. One is it gives John the Fearless sort of, leverages his career and makes that trajectory continue in the direction it is, which then has important points ultimately for, as we've said, Agincourt and all that kind of business. So it's important there. It's also important because it does have artillery being used on the battlefield, not just as siege weapons, but on the battlefield against another army. And this, is it really the first, or is it just one of the first? I mean, this is early.
It's early, yeah. The Gentenars, the Battle of Bevershout-Houtsfeld, which was fought just prior to Rosbeek. The Gentenars used, but they're bringing their cannons to besiege. They're bringing their cannons to hit the walls, and the bourgeois are all drunk because of the Holy Blood celebrations there. And they decide to come out and face them, and the Gentenars just said, "Okay, well, we'll fire our cannons off at you guys."
Yeah.
Here it is maybe the first, certainly one of the first times that we see gunpowder weapons being used on a battlefield with the determination of actually causing damage. They don't. But it is, and maybe the reason they don't is why there isn't a large number at Agincourt in a few years. They go back to besieging, to use as siege weapons more. But we're going to start to see more and more on battlefields and taking more of an offensive role. Here, not, they didn't work, but the Liégeois were doing the right thing. They were doing what a general with artillery in 50 years is going to be doing on the battlefields. So, if my thought along these lines is, geez, if you just moved one more boat length forward, they're still not going to be able to reach you. John the Fearless is not going to be able to reach you. Maybe then your cannons could have had some effect. But they weren't on carts at this point. They would have been mounted and on unmoving mounts, and so it was difficult for them to seethe once they had failed on the battlefield to move them closer.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a sad one for the Liege side, Liégeois side. A happy one for the Burgundians, for John of Furios. He's feeling good. And thus ends the Battle of Othée.
Yeah.
What if you could have a piece of information about this battle that we do not have? What would it be?
Well, I said it before, but I think it's not. I want a POV from the Liégeois side, and we don't.
Hmm.
That will not be the case in later battles. There will be some that take Liégeois side, but in this one, no. It's just the Burgundian side. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, you want to know why y'all in this position, right? Why take this position when uh, you could have done something better. I know that the um, he had the idea, the rebel leader had the idea of let's guerrilla campaign this thing, and they were like, no, that the rebels didn't want to do that. So he's got to do something, but and I understand wanting to sort of try and prevent John from taking his own good position somewhere. Okay, that makes sense. But it's such a rotten position that they end up
Yeah,
taking, and it'd be nice to have kind of a little bit more explanation on how they thought that could have worked, because I don't think it's foolish. Like it's there had to have been some kind of rationale here, and we just can't quite access it. That'd be nice to have.
and
You know.
going out and fight, it's clear they don't want to see their own cities besieged. So maybe not. Maybe taking the war away from their families, and so John would not have
Yeah.
been above going and raiding the countryside too if these guys had hunkered all behind the walls. And these
Yeah.
towns were all um, reliant on the agriculture around them. So by taking the battle to him with this chance of, we'll repeat what the Flemings did at Courtrai, that may be the rationale. But it would be really nice if we actually had somebody say, who wrote a letter like John did, but from the other side, and said, "Oh, by the way, this is kind of what we were planning to do."
Yeah. This was what we were going
It
for. It
didn't
didn't
work.
work, but this is
It
what we we're
didn't
going
work,
for.
and maybe that's it. Maybe they just killed off anybody who could give a point of view from the Liege side. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the one again, I think this, if they're kind of moving into open field, let's try and hit them quick while we can, and if they're really hoping that the other towns are going to join them, right? He in his letter, John the Fearless says that 10,000, again, who knows if that's a true number, 10,000 men from Tongren come riding out towards the end to come help the Liégeois, and that they get chased off. He has to chase them off. Well, if the Liégeois were kind of counting
Yeah,
on that, right? We'll get out there, we'll form up, and that will inspire men from Tongren, men from other towns in the area to come rolling out and increase our numbers. If it really is 10,000 men out of Tongren, again, I don't think that's possible. But
yeah,
if it was,
yeah. I don't.
like, oh, wow, that's a huge shot in the arm. I mean, even 1,000 men joining you, that's a huge shot in the arm, and maybe you can have overwhelming numbers. Okay, maybe, but man, I don't know. It's just a rotten position, and then that's
And
poorly.
poorly, yeah, it does for them. Uh, I I would like to get back to this in a more scholarly way, this whole campaign, because it is such an interesting one, mostly because it's so devastatingly bad, especially when the militias
Yeah,
seem to have been, at least doing the right things in the campaigns against Maastricht, but the walls there hold too. I think it's very important for this region, but it is not decisive because it won't put down all the rebellions. John of Bavaria will be Prince Bishop now for until 1418, although he dies in 1425 because he will go over and become Duke of Bavaria. But He's around, and I don't know whether he takes a more and a kinder approach to the remaining people in the town. I don't know.
Kind
I
of
kind
doubt
of
it.
doubt it too. I'd really like to know, like you said, the Tonga troops come out at the end. I'd like to know what the makeup here was, because there were towns that could have been given some sizable militias, and maybe that they were with Liège. Maybe Liège was counting on them joining. I don't know, but we usually
Yeah.
joined with them. So did Dinant, and Paul Vache always did. So I'd be interested to see if there's any records that have more about the makeup of the militias here. But there's no, and I'd also like to know if these English are mercenaries, or if there's some reason
Yeah.
that that the English are sending them there. And do we have any records about the English? Because in 1408, well, we're talking about Henry IV. So would Henry IV have needed Liège or given an alliance to Liège? I don't know. So there's more questions, I
Mm.
think, even though we've got this amazing document about what happens on the battlefield, written by
Yeah.
the Duke of Burgundy himself. There's still so many questions.
Yeah. 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 Nasty
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
Nasty one. As if any of the battles we talk about aren't in the end kind of nasty and it's
yeah.
warfare.
But
You know, what
can
are
you
you going to do?
imagine? I mean, here's this Duke of Burgundy, still fairly young, 1408, and his two battles has seen thousands massacred. Um, so wow, he doesn't fight again in a battle. He will go to sieges. He fights a few skirmishes, but he doesn't make a big attempt at another war, another battle. And I often wonder, he does give the brother he's writing to, Anthony, he gives him permission to join the English. I'm sorry, join the French side at Agincourt, and he arrives late. That's why he's waiting for John's permission to do so. But I I often wonder if John's reluctance to join that side was not only that he was at war with the Armagnacs, after after he killed Louis of Orleans, but if he also just couldn't see that much bloodshed again.
An interesting possibility. Trauma is
Trauma
real.
is real.
Trauma is real then and now. Well, they are locking the
Yeah,
doors.
yeah, man.
I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. Please do join us next time when we'll be talking about the Battle of Castillon, which we recently visited. We talked about this briefly in our live episode, and want again to thank everybody who came out to the recording of our of episode 31, our live episode at Leeds. Had a terrific audience, wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful audience. So thank you all for coming out, for supporting us. Y'all were amazing. Yeah. Somebody even brought a bottle of port.
It was a very good bottle of port, by the way. Very good.
So
We take alcohol anytime.
yeah. So thank you all. Look, really, really can't thank you all enough for listening and supporting us. And in that regard, as ever, a reminder, this podcast is sponsored by Medievalist.net. So the best way to support us, other than buying our individual books, of course, is to join their Patreon at patreon.com/medievalists. That's also the absolute best place to drop us a line if you have questions for our Q&As. Thank you for listening. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.